What's up, guys? Matt here at More Projects, and today I'm going to show you how to replace all of your coolant hoses for all your heater hoses, anything. This is a project that pretty much anybody should be able to do. Sometimes it's a little harder to access certain areas, but since I've got a fresh rebuild on the CRV behind me, I am going to replace all the hoses because I had one leaking the other day. And if you got one that's already leaking or is dry rotted, you see a bulge coming out of it, it's time to replace all of them. So this will apply to all vehicles, but I'm going to show you how to do it on a 2000 Honda CRV with a B20 motor. So the parts that I've purchased are all Gates hoses from Rock Auto, and I bought the Gates hose clamps for the correct sizes. So basically, to change out your hoses, for your heater hoses, the main things you're gonna need is probably some tools like a screwdriver to remove any of your intake box, any lines that are in the way. You might have to have that. I've got some hose clamp. I got some hose pliers. They're actually made to remove the hoses easier. So I've got 3 different sizes, but this is only the 2 I'm going to use. This is also a hose separator. So it helps when you squeeze it, it'll help separate the hose from whatever piping you have it on. I have a razor blade so that you can cut certain hoses if they've been on there forever and they won't come off. It's good to put a cut in them and then try to pry it off that way instead of trying to squeeze really hard with a pair of pliers, and you could crush the heater hose that goes to your heater core. You got to be careful with the one up against the firewall. To remove most hose clamps, you can get away with a 5/16 or a 1/4 inch bit driver, or if you have the spring style, use a pair of needle nose pliers or a pair of channel locks. Or they also make angled needle nose pliers to get into hard to reach places. I got these at Harbor Freight. All right, so once you have all of your tools and hoses that you need, let's get right into it. You're gonna need a bucket of some sort to catch the coolant because you're gonna need to drain your coolant. So most of the time whenever you're replacing these hoses, you'll notice that they're squishy. They deteriorate over time. If you don't change out your coolant, they start breaking down the hoses on the inside. So whenever you replace these hoses, it's a good idea to change out the coolant to fresh coolant. Now this rebuild only has about 5,000 miles on it since I did the rebuild. So I'm gonna put a link in the description above on how I rebuilt this motor. But so the coolant's fresh in this one, so I'm actually just gonna reuse the coolant whenever I go to, after I replace everything. So the very first step you need to do is drain your coolant from the radiator. Most of them, at the bottom of the radiator, you'll see this little petcock, and you'll be able to twist that, and that will be able to drain your fluid. So let's do that. So if you remove it all the way, now it's got a really small stream. So now I can take off this cap, and that'll allow the gravity to let this pour out a lot quicker. All right, so on the CRV, I've already got the coolant drained. So now that's done. I am now going to show you how to open up a spring clip. So you can use a pair of channel locks. So grab it with your channel locks, squeeze, and then slide it straight back. And you have to move it far enough off of the actual hose outlet. So now once you got that off, now you can twist. It's always good to give it a good twist and pull. We're gonna do the same thing to the other one. All right, so give it a squeeze, pull it off. Give it a good twist. And there's still coolant in there. So I forgot to mention, I am doing this on a vehicle that has been sitting overnight. So it is cooled off. So whenever I broke this loose, I noticed that there's actually still coolant up in the top of the head because the thermostat has not been opened. So since the thermostat has not been opened, when I go to pull this off, it's actually going to drop a lot of coolant. So I went ahead and moved my pan right here, and then I'm going to hose this off afterward. All right, so that's one hose. So the next thing I want to do, I want to remove my air intake system. Typically you would have an air intake that would pretty much take up the entire half of the engine bay, but most of the time you just remove the 10mm bolts that are holding it in. But this one, I put a cold air intake on it, or a hot air intake, I guess you could say. So I'm going to remove this, and that'll allow me more access. Okay. So now with that out the way, I can now access underneath the intake. So back here, I'm going to go ahead and undo this clamp first, and then this is the other one. So let's pull that off. I'm going to get in here and I'm going to twist to break it loose. Okay, so it still has coolant running out. All right, so now I can twist and remove this one. All right, so here's the old ones. All right, so back behind here to see, but I'm going to take this hose clamp off, this one right beside it. So let's take both of those off, and I'm just going to grab it real lightly with my pliers. All right, so I got these special hose clamp pliers. So most of the time what you can do is grab a hold and twist, and then you should be able to pull that off. And of course it's full of coolant as well, so that's gonna make a mess. All right, so prepare yourself for a pretty good bit of mess when you do stuff like this. So there's that. You gotta twist and pull. All right, so this one right here is underneath where the fuel rail is. I'm gonna try to get my channel locks. Try to get my channel locks on there. Squeeze. Okay, so I got that one. That one pulled back right there. So now we need to get our hose clamp pliers. So I'm going to give it a twist and a pull, and that'll get that one off. Pull that one out. All right, let's go ahead and remove the lower radiator hose. All right, so now I've got that. So I should be able to twist and pull. Okay. So now we got to get the bottom part of the radiator hose down here. So I'm actually going to access that from underneath. All right, so down underneath. Give it a wiggle and it comes off. All right, so now from up here, now I can remove that one. All right. So it looks like we have a couple more to replace. there is one right here that goes to the firewall, and it comes to your heater control valve. So this right here is the fast idle valve. It's located right underneath the throttle body. Basically what this does is when you first crank up your car, it's gonna rev it up high so it can try to warm up the car quicker. And then there's a wax pellet in here that as the coolant warms up, it'll close and it'll actually make it idle back down. So if you ever have idle problems, sometimes this is the first thing to look at. Along with the idle air control valve. But now the idle air control valve is on the back side. So there's actually two coolant lines that go to the idle air control valve underneath, and this one has two coolant lines. So you can see this one has this coolant line coming off of it this way, and it goes back around, and it actually goes straight up to the idle air control valve right here. All right, so to get in here, I'm just gonna use a pair of needle nose pliers. So there's the first clip. So now I'm going to try to twist to break this loose. All right. So there's the first one. On the front one, this one right here, got it squeezed, pull that one off. Give it a twist and pull. If you notice, this has like a hard line that loops back around, and it goes underneath the intake. It goes underneath the valve cover, and it connects right here. So this is a bypass valve, or a bypass hose, excuse me. So since this one's kind of hard to get to, I'm going to use my little separator, and I'm just going to pop it right off. All right, so I'm probably going to have to reuse the coolant hard line, but for right now I'm going to throw it on the ground. So the hardest ones of them all is the ones that are on the firewall. So you're going to have to get you're going to have to come over here and get these clamps undone. So I'm actually going to put the phone down, and I'll get back to you as soon as I move these clamps. Very important, do not try to twist these two hoses right here with a pair of pliers, because it will crush your heater hose valve, and I have done that before. If you end up doing that, you'll have to find like a brass or some type of piece of metal to press back in there to round it back off. So what I'm going to recommend trying to do first is see if you can twist it by hand. And so I'm trying to twist this by hand right now, and it is not coming loose. So 9 times out of 10, if these haven't been replaced, these are not going to come loose. This is where the razor blade comes in handy. We're going to cut a slit in here and try to pry it back and then remove it that way. All right, so I just cut a slit in here with the razor blade, as you can see. So sometimes that slit will allow you enough room to be able to pull, to slide that off just like that. So I cut that because this is really soft metal. This most of the time is either brass or aluminum, so very easy to crush. So I'm going to do the same with the other one. And what I like to do is cut it just a couple times. Okay. So now that I've got a slit cut in this one, I'm going to try to pull it down and around, just like so. All right, so now I got to remove this clamp from the back side of the heater control valve. So this one's coming off pretty easily. I'm just going to keep twisting. All right, so as you can tell, we've got majority of them off. The only one I haven't got off yet All right, the only ones we have left to get off now are the ones that go to our idle air control valve. Let's see if I can get down here to show you the idle air control valve. All right, so here's the idle air control valve from the bottom up against the back of the firewall. So you have two hoses that go there. All right, so if I come around to the driver's side, you really don't have much of a good view. So what you can do is you can actually remove this idle air control valve, and that'll allow you more access. So that's what I might do. I might take out these two 12mm bolts that hold this on. All right, so with the two 12mm removed, now you can access these two coolant lines. Now you can get to these with ease. One of them actually goes to the back of the block. So one of them goes back here to the back of the block right there. Right up above where your oil filter basically is, off to the right. So that's gonna be the one that is on the right side, right here. This other one is the one that comes around to right here, to your fast idle valve. Well, I got lucky enough to be able to twist the hose clamp around enough where I could get a pair of pliers onto this one and access it from up here up top. So now if I can get my little hands in here, hopefully now I can get in here. All right, so just to make things easier, I disconnected this clip that goes to the sensor for the idle air control valve and pulled the whole thing up and out so I can replace the hose, and then I can slide it back into place and it'll be a lot easier. All right, so I got all these parts off of Rock Auto, so now I should be able to match up and make sure I've got all the parts that I need. All right, so I got all the hoses now laid out next to the rest of them just to make sure that they match up before I try to install them. And what I've noticed is it looks like the replacement ones that I got from Rock Auto would definitely work, but they look like they're a little bit longer in length on a couple of them. Like this one definitely looks like it's longer on this one. So I might have to trim it to fit, but I'm gonna try not to, just to be on the safe side. All right, so of course, while I got stuff taken apart, I'm gonna do some cleaning and other replacement if I need to. So I had another idle air control valve, but it wasn't the exact one for this vehicle, but it did use the exact same gasket. So I stole that because the other one was nice and flat, and I felt like I might get a vacuum leak around that seal once I put this back on, since I broke it loose. So it's something to be aware of before you do this job. If you're gonna do this, you might want to go ahead and find a replacement, either idle air control valve or just the seal. The seal should be pretty cheap versus the idle air control valve, which can be $40 to a couple $100 depending on where you buy it from. So I replaced that, but I'm also going to clean it. It doesn't look too dirty, but I'm gonna go ahead and clean it out. Normally you would use carburetor cleaner, but all I have is some brake cleaner. And so I'm going to spray a little bit of that in there and see if I can get any gunk out. All right, so now it looks a lot cleaner. So now that will be ready to reinstall. Now, since I made a big mess with all that coolant that poured out and it went everywhere in the engine bay, I could just basically hose it off and be okay, but I'm gonna do a little bit better cleaning than that. And I'm going to spray some of this engine protector shine on it and just kind of clean up just a little of the spots in here, just so that whenever we put it back together, it looks all nice and clean. All right, so I didn't get this on video because it took so long. So I replaced this bottom hose and put a brand new hose clamp on it, one of the Gates hose clamps. Well, that was really hard to get to, so I would recommend, if you replace these, I would say to put a spring clamp on that one right there. This one, I replaced that clamp, and I went ahead and put the hoses on while I had the idle air control valve out of the car. So I just basically snug these up. You don't want these over tightened where it's bulging out the rubber, because then that's just gonna premature wear it. And when I tightened up these 12mm bolts right here, all you want to do is just snug them up and then give them a little extra turn. They don't have to be really, really tight, because that's how you're going to strip out the bolt in here, because I've done it before. So that's 2 hoses down. So let's go ahead and finish replacing the heater core hoses next. All right, so another note, whenever you're installing these, and if you're gonna not reuse those spring clamps and you end up using these hose clamp, this style hose clamps, you need to pre-plan how you wanna put these on here, so that whenever you go to tighten them down, you don't put them in an awkward situation on tightening them. All right, so this is the reason why you wanna measure your hoses before you put them on. So most of them were longer than the rest, but this one right here was actually a few inches shorter than the hose that came off of it. So this is the new hose, and it's basically supposed to go from right here to the back side of the heater control, but it doesn't even slide on one and fit to the other one. So I can't even reuse this old one because I've already cut it. So that one's no good. So luckily, I have an extra hose laying around. So I have one of these hoses, but I had an extra one laying around from another project. I'm gonna have to cut this one in half and basically use it to replace this hose. So luckily I got this one. If not, I'd have to go to the auto parts store. So just something to be aware of. Whenever you're replacing hoses, make sure you got the right hose with the right length. So I cut this in half, so let's see if this will be enough length to be able to do what we need. If you got a hose that's a little hard to put on, you can just spit on it and it'll make it slide on a little easier. So there's. All right, so now that I've cut my hose long enough, it looks like I actually cut it just a little bit too long, but that's okay. We can still make it work. So now I'm gonna go ahead and slide some hose clamps on here. All right, so here's the other hose that goes against the firewall. I've already kind of pre-fitted it to see which direction it goes, and I used the spring hose clamps again on this one because it was really hard to get back here to tighten up the twist style locking ones. So I'm just going to reuse these, And so I've already got them angled the direction that I want to. So now I just got to reinstall them. I've got it now connected, and now we need to short. Sorry about all the background noise, guys. It's a beautiful day outside today, so people are out riding their motorcycles, kids are out playing, so I do apologize. So this hose right here, I need to shorten it. So it looks like I need to cut off about right here where it says N. I need to cut it off right about there to be able to slide that up on there. All right, so now that I've gotten it shortened, now I can slide this up on here, and now move the hose clamp. All right, now I can move that hose clamp right back up here. All right, so now the next one I'm going to do is the one that connects from right here to right here, so it loops around. So I need the long side to be on top. I want it to be in there just like this. All right, so to get this to go on a little bit easier, I've already got my hose clamps facing forward. Got the top one is the long side, and I went ahead and I just kind of spit on the ends of it just so that it'll be easier. All right, so now I got that bypass hose installed. Okay, so this hose right here is going to basically fit on right here. It's going to fit on right here, and then it comes around to here. Just like that. And now we can slide these hose clamps back on. And remember, whenever you're putting these hose clamps back on, make sure you put it in a direction that you can access it again easily. You don't want to put it out of the way to hide it. I mean, even though it's nice to hide some of these hose clamps just for the looks, sometimes it's better to make it where it's accessible than just hiding it. All right, so now this top one for the lower radiator hose, put that on back here, and then the lower one we're going to crawl underneath. And slide that one on there. All right, so I got that one on. Main reason you want to use a pair of channel locks is because it's adjustable so that you can get into you can get a hold of all of these large hose clamps all the way down to small hose clamps, and they're longer, so you're able to get more leverage to squeeze. So now I've basically replaced all of the hoses. The only one I haven't replaced yet is these little bypass hoses right here. I'm gonna have to go to the auto parts store to go get those. I thought I ordered them on Rock Auto, and I didn't see them on there, I guess. So I might have to go to the auto parts store to replace these. But for the time being, I'm just gonna go ahead and reinstall this just so I can show you how to burp the system and add your coolant. All right, so I'm about to wrap this video up, and I went to the auto parts store and got a 5/16 piece of hose, and instead of using this style hose, which basically goes to your intake manifold and then also uses that to make like a bypass hose, all I did is I just went ahead and it goes right there underneath, right here. So it goes from there to this fast idle valve. And so I just made a straight line over there. It cost me a couple dollars at the auto parts store. And so now I have all of the hoses under here replaced, and I replaced the gasket for this. So now I'm able to basically pour the coolant in here. We'll crank it up and let it idle until it warms up, opens the thermostat, and then after that you should be able to top it off by just filling up your coolant reservoir overflow, and that's pretty much it. So that's how you replace all of your hoses on a 2000 CRV. I hope this video helped somebody. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace. All right, so don't do like me. So make sure you put your last hose on, and when you start filling up your coolant, don't forget to put in the petcock, the drain valve, and make sure it's tight. Yeah, don't forget to tighten this up, because I forgot to put mine in, and as I started putting coolant in, it was running right out.